I welcome you to the Sephiroth Center of Shamanism, where we break down the ancient technologies of shamanism and the occult, bringing them into balance with the deep psyche. My name is Luke, experienced practitioner and mentor of the shamanic and occult sciences. It's an absolute honor to have you with me. Before I start this topic, if you do have interest in working with me through my mentoring programs or through my membership programs, then definitely check out the links in the description of this video. First link for my premium membership service, the Sephiroth Shamanic School. Second link for the Patreon. And the third link if you're wanting to work with me one-on-one through healing and mentoring. As I said, links are in the description. Definitely check those out if you feel the call. So today's topic is going to be a very important one from the perspective of occult initiation and self-development. Specifically, we're going to be looking at non-dualistic Kabbalah, understanding the Sephiroth and the Qliphoth together in tandem and as unique evolutionary pathways in their own right. We're going to be looking at the real purposes of both the Qliphoth and the Sephiroth and how they really do lead to the same thing. Even saying that within some communities, within the occult, can be extremely controversial, but we're really going to be looking at how bringing them together and working with both actively and regularly is an ideal way to really bring optimal grounding and balance and ultimately completion to your initiatory processes. We're going to be looking at each of the spheres individually, giving an overview of each one from the perspective of its emanating principle, its Sephiroth, and its repelling principle, its Qliphoth, and understanding how the given Qliphoth and Sephiroth is actually one sphere, representing different portions of the same energy. We're going to be looking at how initiating through both is ultimately going to provide that perfect balance between order and chaos that is needed within your evolutionary process. And most importantly, we're going to be looking at how embodying one and neglecting the other can very easily feed in to existing fragmentation and false dualistic programming. This is a revolutionary way to approach Kabbalah, a revolutionary way to approach occult initiation in general. It's going to shatter a lot of preconceived illusions within both the left-hand path community and the right-hand path community. It's going to bring them together as one to provide optimal integration and healing. This is going to be an essential video for anybody who is wanting to explore occult initiation from a grounded and balanced place, so definitely stay tuned. So when we talk about the Kabbalistic tree, we are referring specifically to a very solid process of initiation that has the basic purpose of returning you to the source, shattering the illusion of self, and ultimately helping you to embody your truth and authenticity from within the physical body. Kabbalah is really about understanding your separation from source, so that you can remember why you are actually here and begin that process of journeying back to the source. So if I show the Kabbalistic tree of life here, this is a very detailed diagram and map of consciousness that shows the process that energy needs to travel through in order to separate itself into a physical, tangible experience. So what it basically shows is the route that the divine energy needs to take. So starting at the top sphere, which is Kether, Kether meaning the creator consciousness, also known as the primal oneness that was birthed from the darkness, but then needs to separate itself in order to get to know itself, to define a meaning for itself. So basically, Kether is the source in this particular example. Okay, Kether is that oneness which we all come from, and all of the other Sephiroths, all of the other spheres represent specific emanations that Kether basically echoes itself through in order to define a given meaning for itself. So when we are in that primal state of oneness, it's beautiful, it's amazing, but there's no meaning. Okay, so in order for that meaning to be defined, the source has to separate itself into many in order to define a given meaning for itself, on the microcosmic level, on the individual level. We are the products of that separation. So the divine energy flows from Kether, thrusts into existence, and goes to the second sphere known as Chokmah, the divine masculine that thrusts primal wisdom, primal energy out into the cosmos, and is then conceived by the divine feminine sphere known as Binah. So it kind of shoots down and across. Once that energy has been conceived by Binah, you could say Binah then conceives that energy and then gives birth to the rest of the Sephiroth, the rest of the emanations. So it moves from Binah down to Chesed, Chesed representing ever-flowing compassion, love, and abundance. That abundance is then brought into balance by Geburah. That is then brought into balance by Tiphareth, what you could call the Christ consciousness. That then moves down into Netzach to develop victory, then moves across to Hod to develop splendor, and then down to Yesod, meaning the astral plane, the formative plane, until it reaches the physical, tangible experience. Okay, so that is the route that the divine essence needs to travel through. It goes from Kether to Chokmah, to Binah, to Chesed, Geburah, Tiphareth, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malkuth. Each one of these spheres, each one of these Sephiroths represents a planet within our solar system. So it is a planetary gateway that is also connected to the human energy field as well. Okay, each of these spheres is connected to a particular portion within the nervous system. So when you're working with a sphere, you are working with that given portion of your nervous system. So in order to initiate the Kabbalistic tree of life, you are reversing that separation process and are basically then consciously gathering the divine energies from each of the Sephiroth in order to then embody it, learn how to emanate it within your day-to-day life until you reach Kether, which then brings about a final integration process whereby you integrate that oneness and everything that you have processed on the tree into your physical body. So once you have reached the top of the tree, you will shoot straight back down the middle, back down to Malkuth, back down to the physical experience, grounding all of the emanations and the emanating qualities that you have gained. Okay, it is a beautiful process of initiation, but we first need to understand why that is needed. Okay, and in order to understand that on a deep level, we need to take ourselves back to the beginning of creation itself. Okay, so we all come from the goddess. Okay, we all come from the void space, the dark matter energy. Okay, the dark matter is what you could call the primordial chaos that exists outside of the Sephiroth. Okay, the primordial chaos is the infinite void space that encases the Sephiroth. Okay, the primordial chaos is much bigger than the Sephiroth, infinitely bigger, and holds its hidden potential. We are referring here, when we talk about the primordial chaos and the void, we are referring to the dark feminine currents of energy. Okay, the void consciousness that births things into existence. Okay, so if we take it back to before the Sephiroth entirely, and we look at the process of creation being birthed, we need to look at why that is. Because the darkness has no meaning. Okay, what the darkness is pure potential, pure infinity. This is why people say darkness holds more power than light, because it's pure potential. It's not defined by anything yet. Whereas if we're born, say, here in this physical, tangible multiverse in Malkuth, in this emanating structure, then we are born into a predefined multiverse. We're born into a multiverse that already has predefined constructs, rules, laws, and regulations that have been in place for a very long time. So when we are born into a multiverse which is already predefined, we only have those predefined constructs to refer to. However, where we really come from before that on the soul level is the dark matter, which is the pure potential, okay? The pure potential, okay? Because it doesn't have any definitive meaning. It's pure emptiness. And when you start interacting with occult initiation in a very deep way, and particularly if you start working with the void energy through the abyss, through the Daath, and other types of explorations using void energy, you realize that the real source is the void. The real source is that dark matter, that emptiness that birthed everything into existence. But it's completely redundant without the light matter. Okay, and this is what many people within the left-hand path community don't really acknowledge in that respect. Yeah, that darkness is alluring, it's beautiful, it's powerful. Some people are scared of it, but many people, want to bathe in it without understanding that you also need to bring light. You also need form to create any meaning to that exploration at all. And this is exactly the reason why our multiverse was birthed from the depths of the abyss. Okay, it was birthed from the depths of the abyss in order to define a given meaning for itself. Okay, so we have infinite nothingness, infinite dark matter. The light is birthed from the depths of the abyss. That generates what we call the positively charged void. So in a way, we have that dark matter void, dark matter energy, what you could call in Qliphothic Kabbalistic terms, the trans-Qliphothic realms, pure infinity, pure infinite darkness. From the depths of the darkness, light matter is birthed, which cultivates a positively charged void, which is then what you could call the trans-Sephiroth, okay, or what many would call the trans-Sephirothic veils. That positively charged void begins to gather, okay, and creates three veils of void energy. Ein Sof, and Ein Sof Or. Ein Sof Or being that first stage, Ein Sof Or, Ein Sof, and then Ein. Okay, that all gathers and then cultivates consciousness itself. Okay, Ein Sof, and Ein Sof Or, the three veils of the trans Sephiroth, begin to form into a single sphere, an emanation, and that emanation is the top sphere, Kether. It continues to take form, and then we are in that oneness. The oneness is developed, okay? That is pure infinite consciousness, pure oneness. We're all together, it's beautiful, but there's no meaning to it all. So then Kether has to separate itself. Kether has to echo itself, okay, down through various emanating principles in order to then reach the physical, tangible experience where what Abrahamic spiritualists would call the divine plan is carried out. And what the divine plan really refers to when we break out of religious dogma and jargon, it refers to the process of the soul defining a meaning for itself on the microcosmic level, carrying out the divine plan. Okay, so that's the whole purpose behind the Sephiroth itself. Okay, so we have initially infinite darkness, infinite void, light is birthed from the depths of the abyss, cultivates a positively charged void. That positively charged void begins to gather, becomes more dense, cultivates the three veils, Ein Sof and Ein Sof Or, which then combine into one to cultivate oneness, and that oneness is Kether. Kether then thrusts itself into existence, which then cultivates the first sphere, Chokmah, pure, unregulated, masculine wisdom that is then received and conceived by Binah. Okay, and that creates the supernal triad within the top triad that you see here, the top triangle, the top three spheres. That cultivates the supernal triad, the highest level of divine consciousness, pure oneness, pure wisdom, and pure understanding. Okay, and then it creates that perfect balance throughout the tree, that perfect balance of masculine and feminine energy. Okay, with all of the spheres on the right side being masculine in nature, causing you to have to emanate outwards, and all of the spheres on the left side being feminine in nature, causing you to have to go inwards, integrate boundaries, all of these different things. So then it moves, separates itself further, cultivates love that is then emanated outwards once again, that pure love, compassion, ever-flowing river of love and compassion that is then brought into balance by its opposing sphere. So these are Chesed, meaning love and compassion, kindness, and then there is Geburah, which then puts the brakes on that. Then both of those divine principles emanate down to cultivate the middle sphere, okay, the sphere of the sun, which is Tiphareth. Okay, and Tiphareth is the sphere of beauty that sits at the center of creation. There are also two pathways that lead diagonally down from Binah, the divine feminine, and Chokmah, the divine masculine, and then connect to the middle sphere. This is why Tiphareth is often seen as the place of Christ consciousness, which basically is the threshold between the higher realms and the lower realms. Okay, so Christ consciousness again is kind of seen as that sort of incarnate, almost prophet-like energy that kind of balances the divine energy and the tangible energy into one consciousness. Once the beauty has been cultivated to sit at the center of creation, what the Abrahamic spiritualists would call the Christ consciousness, the separation process continues and moves into the lower triad, which is the astral triad. Okay, the astral triad cultivated by Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. The astral triad then begins to shape the tangible astral plane, starting with the masculine principle of Netzach, the Venusian energy, emanating that pure artistry outwards, emanating that pure emotional intelligence outwards, brought into perfect balance by Hod, brought into perfect balance by the mercurial sphere known as Hod, which is very much logic and balanced intellect. Once again, those energies then shift down and cultivate Yesod. Okay, Yesod being the astral plane itself, the formative plane, the place where possibility descends into from the higher Sephiroth to take form before it manifests into Malkuth, the tangible experience. Okay, so it takes a bit of time to get your head around it, but the process of initiation is actually extremely simple to understand. That is the process of emanation from the oneness down through the different emanations to the tangible experience in order for us to define a meaning for ourselves. The initiation process reverses that, okay, which means that you're then going up instead of going down. So you're initiating from Malkuth, starting with Malkuth, embodying the necessary qualities of Malkuth so that you can ground the rest of the Sephiroth. And then you're moving through each of the spheres and given pathways one by one in order to then emanate those given principles. Okay, and remember who you are. Understand your process of separation so that you can begin the process of journeying back to oneness from within the physical, tangible experience. That is the purpose of the Sephirothic initiation. However, we also have the Qliphothic initiation as well. Okay, and Qliphothic initiation is a different story altogether. Whereas Sephirothic initiation is a masculine path of emanation, okay, angelic process of initiation, embodying the divine essences of the angels that you can then embody and integrate into your physical body. The Qliphoth, on the other hand, is the feminine principle of the Kabbalah, okay, the feminine aspect of the tree. It's foolish to think that these are separate paths of initiation entirely. Don't get me wrong, they have their individual purposes. For example, the Sephiroth, teaching you how to emanate, journey back to oneness. It does align with what many call right-hand path occult practice, which is typically more patriarchal and religious in nature. And the Qliphoth then has purposes that are much more related to what we would call self-deification within the left-hand path practices. But bringing these together is essential to understand. Okay, and from a left-hand path practitioner perspective, embodying the Sephiroth is often seen as just a gateway to the Qliphoth, or something to be completely ignored altogether because it represents patriarchy. And the truth is that, yeah, if you went and learnt and was initiated through the Sephiroth by a particular order or religious group, then yes, it would be patriarchal in nature. But this is a very personal path of evolution that is all about helping you to understand where the order really sits within your day-to-day life. That's the purpose of the Sephiroth, order. Okay, the cultivation of divine order into your physical body, integrating that into your body, teaching you how to emanate. The Qliphoth, on the other hand, is the complete opposite to that. Okay, instead of exploring light matter, you are exploring the primordial portions that encase the Sephirothic energy. As I said before, the primordial chaos surrounds the light matter. Okay, it literally takes on the form of the light matter being a beam of consciousness, beam of pure awareness within an infinitely dark space. Okay, and what you're doing by exploring the Qliphoth is that you are exploring the infinitely dark space that surrounds each of the spheres and given pathways. So each of the Qliphothic spheres represents everything that the Sephiroth represents, but twisted and inverted, and showing you what happens when these principles get blown out of proportion, which, if you look at right-hand path practices, love and light spirituality, things that don't really embody any darkness, or things that don't bring the light into balance with the darkness and only look at the light, that's how these things can really start to play out in ways that are unhelpful. And each Sephiroth is going to have a shadow aspect to it that, if you don't bring it into balance, then that Sephirothic energy could very easily fall out of balance within your own nervous system, and then it can start operating from what many left-hand path practitioners would judge the right-hand path practitioners as is righteous. Okay, and that can create righteousness within one's evolutionary path. What happens from righteousness? Cult-like activity, controlling energy, repressed shadow, causes corruption to play out on the unconscious level, and just gets covered up with love and light. Okay, so the purpose of exploring the Qliphothic realms is to explore the primordial portion that encases the Tree of Life, which means that you are exploring a realm that is infinitely dark in nature. Okay, which means that the Qliphoth, from an evolutionary point of view and in terms of the power that can be gained, the Qliphoth does hold more power than the Sephiroth because it's bigger, because it's infinitely bigger than the Sephiroth. Okay, therefore it does hold significantly more power than the Sephiroth itself. But it doesn't mean that it is better than the Sephiroth. It doesn't mean that the Sephiroth does not have a place within your evolutionary path. Okay, typically what happens, right-hand path, Abrahamic spiritualists completely ignore the Qliphoth. Yeah, it shouldn't journey there, full of demons, full of evil spirits, all of that kind of rubbish. And then the left-hand path practitioners do exactly the same with the Sephiroth, okay, and just ignore angels, ignore light. And what this does is that it just feeds into the dualistic and dogmatic view of reality in general. So it's not about choosing a side. Yeah, many occult practitioners would disagree with me when I say this, but it's not about choosing a side. It's not about choosing the path of darkness or the path of light. It's about bringing them both together, and that would call, oh, you're a middle path practitioner. No, I'm not a middle path practitioner. Yeah, because even the middle path is, you can't stay in the middle of darkness and light. Yeah, I like to say that I walk a more crooked path of evolution. Yeah, which means that you're going to venture into realms of order and then venture into realms of chaos, order, chaos. It aligns with the cycle of nature, death and rebirth, masculine and feminine, consciously shifting from order into chaos, from death into rebirth. Okay, so what you will find is that if you really approach the Sephiroth and the Qliphoth together, you will kind of spend certain amounts of time within one and then will naturally shift to the other. Okay, I think I've explained it in previous videos, but how my initiatory process started through the Kabbalah is that I started initiating through the Sephiroth. The Sephiroth was an amazing path of initiation, but then I got to Geburah, the sphere of strength, and then received clear guidance as to like, no, don't go any further. You now need to start the Qliphothic journey. And I was like, oh, that was different from what I thought, because I heard from everyone else, oh, you should do the Tree of Life first to prepare for the Qliphoth. My evolutionary path, my soul clearly didn't want me to do that. So what ended up happening is that I got to Geburah on the Tree of Life, and then I started the Qliphothic initiation. Then once I got to the shadow aspect of Geburah, which is Golachab, then the initiation continued, actually doing both spheres at the same time. So then it would be entering Ghagsheblah, the Qliphothic sphere of Jupiter, and Chesed, the Sephirothic sphere of Jupiter at the same time, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so what I've certainly found is that one does lead to the other. Okay, you embody the Sephiroth, you embody light. Eventually, you're going to have to deal with the shadow side one way or another, whether you go into the Qliphoth consciously or not. Eventually, for example, yeah, you embody Chokmah, the beautiful sphere of wisdom, the second to top sphere, yeah, the masculine sphere of wisdom. Yeah, you're learning how that wisdom sits into your day-to-day life. You're allowing it to be seen by others. But what is going to happen if you don't go into the shadow aspect of that, which is Ghagiel? Yeah. Or what is going to happen if you don't at least look at the shadow aspect of wisdom? That's what cultivates the totalitarian gnosis, is what creates the need to dominate. It's what creates the need that's what creates the cult-like energy. It's what creates the need to dominate other people, to disempower other people, because the shadow aspect of that given sphere has not been processed and integrated, so it can easily fall out of balance. The same thing happens if you only embody the Qliphoth. Okay, if you embody the Qliphoth and ignore the Sephiroth, you can end up just spiraling in chaos over and over again, and then you get addicted to chaos. I've been there myself. You get addicted to chaos, addicted to dark matter energy, because it is addictive. It's extremely tangible. It's extremely transformative, without bringing that into balance and understanding how to then cultivate a new order from what you're destroying. Yeah, and this is the purpose of embodying the Qliphothic energy. Particularly when you get to the abyss, you realize that it's all a paradox anyway. Yeah, when you get to the abyss, which is the full merging with the void consciousness within the Qliphothic process, so you move up through the lower spheres up into the abyss, then what you will find is that you will merge with the concept of the void, and you will realize that the whole thing is a paradox anyway. So when you're going through death, you're then opening yourself up to rebirth, which means that you're naturally going to be embodying the Sephirothic principles anyway. Yeah. What I certainly have found is that going through the Qliphoth develops a much deeper understanding, or helps you to develop a much deeper understanding of the Sephiroth in general. Going through the Qliphoth definitely helps to develop a deeper understanding of the Sephiroth, purely because we are working with, what's underneath. Okay, we are working with the primordial portion, which is going to hold, in essence, the architectural drawing for the Sephiroth itself, much like how the unconscious mind holds the architectural drawing for the physical experience before it comes into fruition. It's the same with the Qliphothic realms. When you're exploring the Qliphothic realms, you're exploring what is actually holding the given sphere together within the Sephiroth. Okay, and then once you've processed and integrated that shadow aspect, then you're naturally going to shift into resonance with the Sephirothic aspect of that given sphere. Okay, so to show you exactly what I mean by that, I'm just going to get rid of the diagrams here for a moment. I'm going to show you a picture using the sun, the sphere of the sun, which is Tiphareth, but also the sphere of Thagirion. Okay, so if I show you the image here, okay, this is a very good representation of how the tree will actually look, okay, or how that given sphere will actually look if you are taking into account both the Qliphoth and the Sephiroth together. Okay, as you can see, this is the sphere of the sun, but also the sphere of the black sun. Okay, they are one sphere. Okay, and this is how all of the spheres will appear to you. Okay, this is how every single one of the spheres will appear to you when you take the Qliphoth into consideration as well as the Sephiroth. The Sephiroth is the beam of pure awareness, okay? The beam of pure awareness that shines into the depths of the abyss, okay? So Tiphareth is the tiny portion in the middle there, yeah? But is essential in order to then define a meaning for the primordial portion. Thagirion, which is the sphere of the Black Sun, the shadow aspect of Tiphareth, Thagirion is then the primordial portion of that given sphere. Which basically means that you can then see how vast the Qliphoth is compared to the Sephiroth. But if you only embody the Qliphoth and you only initiate through Thagirion and you don't experience initiating through Tiphareth, then it's very easy for the qualities of Thagirion to then fall out of balance, okay? Because then there's not a definitive meaning for that given initiatory process unless it's brought into the tangible experience. So this is why many people say that you should initiate through the Sephiroth first to establish the order, embody the principle, and then initiate through the Qliphoth. But there's no room for generic recommendations in a path that is so extremely personal. So this is how the spheres will appear. It will be the same for Malkuth and the Qliphothic aspect Nahemoth, the same for Yesod, and the Qliphothic aspect, which is Gamaliel, the same for Hod, which is then the Qliphothic aspect, which is Samael. So this is how each of the spheres will appear, and this mirrors our own unconscious mind and the creation of the cosmos itself, okay, the creation of light, matter, and form itself. Because the Sephiroth is created to define a meaning for the darkness, this is very much how the light matter sits. This, in a sense, if you look at this example, this is the light matter within the dark matter. This is the conscious mind within the unconscious mind. And you could see the kind of the red outer layer as that sort of grey matter that then represents the subconscious mind, the things that then start to pass through from the deep unconscious, from the primordial portion, to then take form before it then manifests into the tangible experience. Okay, you can see this in many different ways. The Necronomicon is also a very good way of describing this as well. The Necronomicon is basically the shadow aspect of everything. Okay, if you've ever seen Stranger Things, the concept of the upside down, it's exactly the same concept. Yeah, a shadow aspect, a dark and empty aspect of what is already here, an echo of the tangible experience, but then also holds the architectural drawing for it before it is then brought into the physical, tangible experience. The Necronomicon, which is the gnosis of the deep unconscious, the hidden cities, the liminal spaces, all of that is symbolic of what I'm showing in this diagram here. How what we can see with our conscious mind is only a portion of reality itself. Okay, it's only a portion of reality itself. The rest is purely unconscious, is pure potential. You can't see the rest of it. So to think that you know everything based off of what your conscious mind is creating or what your conscious mind is perceiving provides an extremely limited view of reality itself, okay, which is very much what happens when somebody embodies too much light, or should I say false light, within their evolutionary process, because they are focusing on the minority of creation itself. Whereas if they are willing to explore the darker aspects of the self, then they will venture into the primordial portion that is encasing that pure awareness in order to then expand that awareness further and further and then bring integration to the primordial part of the self. Okay, so this diagram here, very simple, but very clear representation of how each of the spheres on both the Tree of Life and the Tree of Death actually should look. They are one tree. They are not separate from each other. The Qliphoth, the infinite primordial portion that encases the Sephiroth being the beam of pure awareness that is shining into the depths of the abyss. So if I get rid of the diagram there and then show you the Tree of Life and the Tree of Death here again, So it's important to approach both, absolutely essential, because if you neglect one, then you'll be embodying too much of that principle by default without embodying the other. Okay, too much of the Qliphoth without the Sephiroth is ultimately could cause you to spiral in those unhealthy trauma cycles that are represented by the Qliphoth without actually integrating it back into the light matter multiverse in that sense. Okay, if you feel brave enough, maybe even initiating both at the same time could be a helpful endeavor. But again, you know, what you may find and what I think a lot of people end up doing is that they end up just naturally shifting between the Qliphoth and the Sephiroth. So they might do a bit of the Sephiroth and they might do a bit of the Qliphoth, and then that's exactly what I'm referring to when I say the crooked path of initiation. You're not really attaching to a state of light or a state of darkness, but you are being open and willing to really shift, you know, between those different polarities and understand when to embody one and the other, because you're not really going to be in control of it. You're naturally going to be shifting into states of being within your day-to-day lives where, you know, you're going to embody a death process and the passing of an older aspect of yourself, which is Qliphothic in nature. Okay, and encountering what is within the Qliphothic realms will induce that process. But then you have to integrate what's actually underneath it into the physical, tangible experience. And this is why the Qliphoth can become dangerous, you know, because often people just embody the Qliphoth and then neglect the Sephiroth, and then they don't actually integrate the darkness into their physical, tangible experience. Instead, they just end up venturing into these primordial portions, and then, you know, they're not really integrating any of it back into the physical experience. And then it, in a way, it just becomes, yeah, like a mechanism to kind of escape from the light, because then the light we've actually learned is actually less safe to feel, likely because of our previous experiences. So yes, it is valid to say that the majority of the power of Kabbalah does dwell within the Qliphothic realms, absolutely, because it's bigger, but without bringing that back into balance with the Sephiroth, without bringing that into the realm of light matter and form, it can easily fall out of balance, because then we're going into the unseen without bringing what we've actually gained back into the conscious mind. Okay, without bringing what we have uncovered back into our conscious mind to actually process it and really let it integrate on a deep cellular level. So let's have a brief overview rather, at the different spheres and understand what role each one is going to play within your evolutionary path. So we start at the beginning in Malkuth, the Qliphothic aspect being Nahemoth. You initiate through Malkuth. That is all about bringing the divine essence into your physical, tangible experience. What you will find is that you will receive trials that will bring you back to the physical, tangible experience within the Sephiroth. Okay, that is what Malkuth is all about. You work with, typically, if you're working with the angels, you will work with Archangel Sandalphon, who rules over that given sphere, whose role it is to ensure that the divine essence is able to stream freely into the physical, tangible experience. So it's all about grounding you. It's very mundane sphere, lots of practical things that may need to be done in order to basically structure your reality in a way that actually sees the physical, tangible experience as an expression of divine consciousness in its own right. The Qliphothic attribution would be Nahemoth, ruled by Namah. You initiate through Nahemoth. You venture into everything that I just said, but the twisted aspects of it. So you venture into what is really separating you from the physical, tangible experience. You venture into the deep, repressed sexual urges. You encounter everything that's relating to the shadow aspect of the root chakra, which is what Nahemoth and Malkuth are very much connected to within the human energy field. So you are encountering everything that is the shadow aspect of the root chakra. So everything from the perspective of deep repressed sexual urges, also very dreamy. This is where you really learn how to emanate the right qualities within your evolutionary process to be able to carry you through the rest of the Qliphoth. So you are going into a realm here which is incredibly physical, incredibly tangible, and also incredibly grounding. Okay, so whereas Sandalphon will help you to bring balance and order to the tangible experience in a way that's authentic to you, Namah will show you what will happen if that falls out of balance and you repress everything that is very much needing to be embodied within your physical tangible experience in order to be able to really get the most out of what Malkuth has to offer. So we're venturing into a deep realm of sexual alchemy here when we move into the realm of Namah. Okay, everything that has been neglected very much about the sexual energy in general, as well as showing you how to really embody the right principles to be able to take you through the rest of the Qliphothic tree. So very grounding sphere is the Earth sphere. We move up to Yesod, ruled by Gabriel, and the Qliphothic aspect is then Gamaliel, ruled by none other than Lilith herself. So Yesod and Gamaliel are extremely dreamy in nature. Okay, very dreamy. I mean, the first sphere, particularly Namah, is also quite dreamy in itself. You're looking at dreams, particularly nightmares, integrating those nightmares. With Gamaliel, it's like a very similar sphere, I would say, to Nahemoth, just much more dreamy, slightly less tangible, and much more raw when it comes to encountering the deeper sexual urges. So the Qliphothic aspect is basically going to take you into everything that is relating to the sacral chakra, which is everything that may have been neglected about your own feminine energy. Okay, Lilith represents everything that has been neglected within our society in regards to the everything that's been neglected about the sexual energy in regards to the feminine. Okay, so when you enter Gamaliel, you are going to be integrating the deepest and most repressed aspects of your sexual desire, really bridging the gap between what has been deemed as acceptable versus just not acceptable within your physical tangible experience. That is then brought into balance by Gabriel's sphere, and Gabriel is responsible for bringing the divine energy in the positive polarity down through, he's known as the divine messenger, and that is symbolic of the subconscious mind. So what you're doing when you're entering Yesod is encountering the subconscious mind and understanding what is actually cultivating your physical tangible experience. Okay, so you can see here that, you know, even just by looking at both of those spheres in tandem, that they kind of complete each other. Yeah, the Sephiroth is dealing with the complete tip of the iceberg, whereas the Qliphoth is dealing with the deeper repressed aspects of yourself that have basically been stopping you from really embracing that true power and potential that dwells within that portion of your nervous system. So instantly, by what I'm explaining here, you can see how it's very easy for it to fall completely out of balance if you embody one versus the other. Okay. We then move up across to Hod is the Sephirothic aspect, and Samael. Okay, polar opposites completely. In Hod, you're looking at how to integrate intellect, logic, and learning how to embody the path of the scholar. Yeah, learning how to really use intellect and logic to be able to navigate your evolutionary path effectively. Ruled by Archangel Michael, Archangel Michael can help you to embody those principles of Hod, those very logical, very practical areas of Mercury, to fuel your own sense of internal self-expression. So because this is the first sphere on the repelling pillar, the pillar of severity, the feminine pillar, it's very internal in nature from a Sephirothic perspective. From a Qliphothic perspective, you are shattering all of that into a million pieces and are being shown the illusion of the ego itself. Okay, so Samael, ruled by Adramelech, will take you through a big process of dissolving what you thought your ego was. Okay, taking you through a process of really facing your ego on a very deep level, not getting rid of it, but really facing the concept of it in general. You can see, again, polar opposites, how Hod, ruled by Archangel Michael on the Sephiroth, teaching you how to embody the divine principles of logic and intellect, Samael is anti-logic and intellect, yeah, shattering the illusions that are behind it. The question that often comes up here is, okay, so if these are polar opposites, how do you embrace one versus the other? And the truth is that you're going to go through phases. Yeah, you're going to go through phases of shattering the illusion around the ego that is brought by Samael, complete anti-logic. And then you are going to learn through dissolving that illusion how to embody that in a way that's actually helpful and more authentic to you, which is then going to be brought by Hod. Okay, so it's not contradictory to do both, in my view, because you're going to Hod, say for example, you initiate both Hod and Samael at the same time or around about the same time. Naturally, what you'll find is that you'll probably move into one more so than the other, and then will then embody the other. So you may enter Hod, embody the right principles of logic and intellect, and then you might move into Samael to dissolve the illusions that are around it to teach you how to use it effectively. Both work in tandem together. Again, if we're only approaching it from a Qliphothic perspective, people often think they actually genuinely think that they're going into Samael and dissolving their ego, because it does feel like it, because it can create the sensation of going insane. Basically, that's what Samael does. It can create that sensation. It really tests you through your own, sanity and feeling like you're losing the plot. And it feels like your ego is dissolving completely, but it's not. Really, what it's doing is that it's maturing, and it's not neglecting the energy of Hod, but is actually going to help you to embody Hod in a way that is more balanced and in a way that is actually going to help you function effectively within the world around you. You then move across to Netzach, ruled by Archangel Haniel. The Qliphothic aspect would be Arab Zaraq, ruled by Baal. Netzach is in itself quite a challenging sphere, very emotional, deep emotional processing, marking the first sphere on the masculine pillar, the emanating pillar of mercy. Netzach often tests you through means of personal relationships, through means of really allowing your creative expression to be seen. Whilst Hod is the scholar's path, Netzach can be seen as the artist's path. Haniel has a very beautiful, gentle energy and helps you to process emotions on a very deep level. Baal, on the other hand, this sphere is a lot of fun. In Arab Zaraq is the ravens of dispersion, so it's extremely, extremely dissolving in nature, this sphere. Whilst in Samael, from a Qliphothic perspective, you are facing your ego, in Arab Zaraq, you are facing the fruits of your ego, okay, which are basically coping mechanisms, things that you have used to separate yourself from your own potential. Okay, I found the Arab Zaraq extremely intense personally. Baal has a very direct energy. Yeah, he is the god of war. Yeah, so you're going to be tested through means of really facing those deeper repressed fruits of your ego. Okay, so really taking you deeper into dissolving the products of the ego, the products from the perspective of suppression techniques, coping mechanisms, and anything on that level. For me, it was a lot around the body, a lot of hypochondria, lots of deep processing in that way through Baal's sphere, and some quite harsh trials for really shattering the illusions around the coping mechanisms and things like that. So this is where the real sort of like integration started to take place for me. It's when I really started to feel the tangible integration process with the Qliphoth. Okay. So you can see, brings them perfectly into balance. Netzach shows you emotional intelligence, how to approach yourself with compassion, approach others with compassion. Baal shatters the illusions around that, shows you the coping mechanisms. So in that way, you can use the energy of Haniel to approach your coping mechanisms within the Qliphoth with optimal compassion to be able to integrate them and not neglect them. Okay. Arab Zaraq is a very chaotic sphere in nature. Okay, we then move up to Tiphareth. Okay, Tiphareth ruled by Archangel Raphael. Qliphothic aspect is Thagirion, as we've spoken about a bit today, the Black Sun. The Qliphothic aspect is lots of fun. Yeah, lots of fun. So is Tiphareth. They're both a lot of fun. Yeah, I found Tiphareth extremely no real challenges in Tiphareth, really, other than just balancing spiritual practices with physical, tangible stuff. This is where you really start to build a strong connection with your higher self, the Christ consciousness within you, which is perfectly valid, even beyond, Abrahamic spiritualists. But then in Thagirion, you face what you could call antichrist consciousness. Yeah, you're facing the personal daemon. You're facing the illusions that are around beauty in general, because Tiphareth is about learning how to emanate beauty and healing. Thagirion is showing you the illusion that is behind that entirely, exposing illusions of grandeur, showing you how you're pretending, and ultimately letting the black sun devour the illusions that you have around beauty in general. So this could be a lot around like how you look. This could be a lot around, sort of superficial energy, things that you're latching onto in order to define your sense of beauty by. A lot around self-worth, how you are defining your sense of self. Thagirion just dissolves all of that and is very much what I feel a very quiet sphere. It's like everything just goes. It's every guide or any sort of sensation that you're supported just kind of goes, and you kind of have to just sit there and just let the black sun just kind of dissolve the illusions that you have around beauty. Why does that balance Tiphareth? Tiphareth shows you how to embody authentic beauty. So you let the black sun that only shines for itself vampirize and destroy the illusions around the superficial and the illusions around beauty in general. And you then allow Tiphareth to show you how to embody beauty in a balanced way. Okay. It's very easy in Thagirion to be tested through illusions of grandeur, thinking that you've come further than you have. Yeah. You then move up to Golachab in the Qliphothic realm and Geburah within the Sephirothic realm. So this is one sphere which I find extremely similar personally in both. I just find Geburah a much less intense version of Golachab, but both are extremely fiery, both require boundaries, but ultimately are going to help you to integrate boundaries and your true authentic sense of self. Okay, so Geburah, ruled by Gamaliel, is going to test you through means of setting boundaries, test you through means of restraint, and ultimately how to hold yourself back. Yeah, and how to really sit with your desires and impulses. Asmodeus within Golachab takes that to a whole other level. This is the sphere of Mars, by the way, which is extremely fiery and direct in nature. Asmodeus will burn away, the layers of your false self in a very violent way. Yeah, in a way that is literally like you're entering a furnace. It feels like your whole body is on fire at times. Extremely tangible, strong sensation in the body is brought by Golachab. Yeah, so extremely potent sphere. You're really encountering the deeper, more repressed succubi. And what I mean by that is the deeper, more repressed perversions, desires, seeing how you have been trapping your own inner child, understanding your rage, understanding anger on a deep level, and ultimately how to transmute that anger into passion by learning how to meet your own needs. It's a really epic sphere. Yeah, it's like I found unpopular opinion, but I found Golachab extremely enjoyable because I like intense energy, So Golachab for me was extremely beautiful. The same with Geburah, really, just both very direct, quite tangible spheres. But you can see again how they're brought into balance. Golachab helps you to integrate and process everything that happens when Geburah authentic strength is twisted. Yeah. And when Geburah falls out of balance, it becomes extremely dangerous because then you can get stuck in sort of like perverted thought patterns, stuck in anger that you're not actually effectively processing, and things like that. So they bring each other into balance beautifully. Okay, Asmodeus, absolutely amazing spirit, epic journey. We then move into Chesed, which is so gentle. Yeah, Chesed is just a very gentle sphere. Okay, there's a lot of test around mercy. It's a sphere of mercy, Jupiterian sphere. So there's a lot of like, sort of real deep emotional intelligence and compassion that is required when embodying the energy of Chesed. okay, ruled by Archangel Zadkiel. It's not Zafkiel. Zafkiel rules over Binah. Zafkiel's a different spirit. We're talking about Zadkiel here. He really teaches you how to embody that ever-flowing river of love and kindness. It's an extremely abundant sphere and is a sphere that is there to be enjoyed with yourself and other people. Ghagsheblah shows you the illusion around desire and abundance in general. So in Ghagsheblah, ruled by Astaroth, you have to dissolve the illusions that are behind the abundance in general. Okay, so this can be illusionary desires that are actually coming from lack, that are just completely just, how do I put it? That are just coming from a place that is unconsciously wounded, like desires that you may be putting on things or expectations that you may be putting on things from a financial perspective, lots around coping mechanisms, again, addictions, things like that, can really come to the surface in Ghagsheblah. I found Ghagsheblah extremely intense sphere to work in, but again, bringing each other into balance. You're encountering the illusion of desire, allowing that to melt away completely so that you can then embody true, authentic abundance and compassion that is embodied by its Sephirothic aspect. Okay, so Ghagsheblah and Chesed, beautiful phase of the journey, but particularly from a Qliphothic perspective, this is where you're really preparing to go into the abyss. Yeah, and it starts by dissolving the illusions around your desires in general. You then reach the Daath. Okay, and this is a different story because the Daath is not technically a sphere on both trees. Okay, the Daath is more of a liminal gateway. I personally found that by going through the Qliphothic abyss, you do not have to go through the Sephirothic abyss if you are going through the Qliphothic abyss. Okay, that's a different story. You can kind of like perform an opening of the Sephirothic abyss if you're going through the Qliphothic abyss at the same time, but it's not really required. Okay, so from my perspective, I didn't actually initiate into the Sephirothic abyss directly. But what I did was initiate into the Qliphothic abyss, which is creating a merging with the void. Yeah, when you're merging with the abyss through the Qliphoth, it removes the need to go through the Sephirothic abyss. Yeah, because the Sephirothic abyss, you're basically getting a limited 30-day trial of the primordial chaos of the night side. You're kind of descending down, deconstructing, and then going back up the other side. But if you're going through the Qliphothic abyss, you're going through it, you're becoming an aspect of the void itself. So then you don't need to dip into the Sephirothic abyss to go through that dissolution process because you're already going to be going through a more extreme version of it, basically. Yeah. So what happens when you go through the Qliphothic abyss, you'll go through significant dissolution. It's only an overview I'm giving here. So much more to it. Watch my videos on the abyss, vampiric metamorphosis, Beast of 666, how to cross the abyss successfully for more direct information on the abyss. But you go through huge amounts of dissolving and dissolution, in order to then tap into the true knowledge that comes after death. In that sense, yeah, and that is the purpose of going through the Sephirothic abyss. So Sephirothic abyss, the purpose is dispersion of the illusion so that you can effectively embody the supernal triad. But the purpose of the Qliphothic abyss is to actually become the void itself and to be permitted true access to the night side by Shugal and Choronzon. Choronzon ruling over the Qliphothic abyss and Shugal ruling over the Sephirothic abyss. But what I found by going through the Sephirothic abyss, I would just work with both of them. The Qliphothic abyss, I would work with both of them. So I would just call Shugal Choronzon and invoke them both together. Okay, so you don't need to go through the Sephirothic abyss if you are already going through the Qliphothic abyss. Okay, because you are becoming the void, and that removes the need to go into the Sephirothic abyss entirely. You then reach the supernal triad. This is fun. Binah, okay, the sphere of understanding, okay, understanding how to restrain yourself, okay, be still, and embody clear and crisp understanding that then comes after the abyss, ruled by Archangel Zadkiel. You will be taught to embrace and embody spiritual maturity so that you can understand from a place that is not seeking. That very much links in on a very, 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 very deep level to Satariel. Satariel, if you think that you're going to get to the end of the abyss and then go through Satariel and it to be completely smooth, you're probably wrong about that. Satariel is extremely chaotic. It's like a labyrinth. Like, you are just you literally in the dark. And this is where you have to learn how to see in the dark and how true understanding does not come from seeking things that are illusionary outside of you. Okay, to truly understand something, you do not have to go outside of yourself to find it. True understanding comes from embracing the unknown, and that is what Satariel shows you in a nutshell. Okay, Satariel shows you that true understanding and true, what you could call inverted understanding, comes from being able to relax into the unknown and release the need to understand anything anyway. And that shows you how to embody Binah in a way that is extremely helpful. I've heard of people going through Binah and not quite understanding what Binah is actually trying to show them, because when you're going through Binah, sphere of Saturn, it's extremely, again, it can be quite a quiet sphere from a Sephirothic perspective, but from a Qliphothic perspective, this is where it really completes. Yeah, and when you enter the Supernal Triad, it's like, because the Supernal Triad is so completely intangible, particularly from a Sephirothic perspective, this is where it really does help to go through the Qliphothic versions of it as well, because it's hard enough to embody the principles of the supernal triad from within a physical body, let alone the shadows that are around the concept of wisdom and understanding in general. Okay, so when you're entering Satariel, you are going to really learn how to embody Binah in a helpful way. In other words, you're going to learn how to understand based off of your own internal gnosis without having to go outside of yourself to find it. And that is a completely invaluable tool that will change your evolutionary path. And often in this sphere, once you've embodied that, you allow your own personal gnosis to actually reveal to you a portion of your true will. And that is just a whole other process of illumination that happens from within the darkness. Okay, and that is required in order, in my view, in order to really embody what Binah is actually trying to show you anyway. You then move to Chokmah, ruled by Archangel Raziel. Okay, this is where you've been through the trials of understanding, and now you have to learn to emanate pure, unchanted wisdom without any need for it to be understood. Okay, Raziel, keeper of secrets, keeper of magic, rules over the sphere of Chokmah. The divine masculine shows you how to emanate your potential through your own evolutionary path, allowing other people to see you. However, this can very easily fall out of balance, because what can happen is that you then create an illusion of grandeur, once again, off of what you gain from the infinite wisdom of Chokmah, and then it can create the sensation that you've come further than you have. This is why it's important to face the Qliphothic aspect, which is Ghagiel. Yeah, Ghagiel, ruled by Beelzebub, the demonic divine masculine, will deconstruct the twisted masculine, will deconstruct the toxic, wounded energy that is behind the divine masculine in general, will completely deconstruct all of it so that you can truly process and embody your need to have power. Okay, we all go into this process wanting a form of power, and Beelzebub will show you how to use that power in the right way. Okay, inverted wisdom basically means that if you do not encounter Ghagiel, it's very easy for the wisdom that you gain in Chokmah to fall completely out of balance, and then you end up operating from internal power struggles and often disempowering people around you in order to sort of exhibit your power, and that is Ghagiel when it goes unintegrated. Yeah, if you don't integrate Ghagiel, you realize how much power you have, but you still have not integrated the aspects of yourself that are powerless. And wounded masculine comes from feeling powerless. It's important to really ground that information. So in Ghagiel, you have to go through the death and decay of your wounded masculine self so that you can effectively embody the wisdom of Chokmah in an optimally clear and crisp way. Absolutely essential initiatory process to go through. You then reach Kether. Okay, you then reach Kether, which is the embodiment of that oneness. Okay, but there's a caveat to that. Okay, Kether, extremely powerful, intangible, but without facing Thaumiel, you are not going to fully understand how the cosmos has really come into existence. Okay, and if you only go into Thaumiel, then you're only going to understand it from an adversarial perspective. So you go through Kether to understand how patriarchy has been created, understanding that you are part of the creator consciousness from a light matter perspective. You go into Thaumiel to merge with AC/DC, alternate current, direct current, alternate current, Satan, direct current, Moloch. Yeah, so you merge with those two potent adversarial forces to become an avatar of the adversarial forces itself, to become an avatar of the adversary, and you are shown through your own personal gnosis the darkest realm within the set structure of the Qliphoth, not talking about the trans-Qliphothic realms here, but you are shown how creation has actually come from the adversarial forces. Yeah, you are shown that the adversarial forces are what birthed creation, and Kether will not show you that. Yeah, Kether will show you that you are one with God. Yeah, it will show you your own divinity. It will, but not from a void perspective. Yeah, Thaumiel will show you your own divinity from a much wider perspective, okay? And you'll very much be like, okay, I didn't see it like that before in that sense, yeah? So you're not going to understand how creation has really come into fruition without embodying both Kether and Thaumiel. You only embody Thaumiel, you're understanding it only from the adversarial perspective. You embody Kether, you're understanding that you are also one with the light matter as well as the darkness. Okay, so it's an important process to ground and integrate together. Okay, both of them will show you how the cosmos has actually come into fruition and what the real purpose of it actually is. Okay, and that for some can be a very difficult realization to come to. And I say, don't go into these paths unless you want to really gain gnosis into how creation has really come into fruition. Don't go into these initiatory processes unless you want that gnosis, because you're not going to be able to turn back. Once you've seen what is on the other side, you're not going to turn back. You cannot turn back. It's going to be hard on your body, and you're going to be basically cursing yourself by trying to place yourself back into a normal physical existence after you have gone through that realization that is brought by both Kether and Thaumiel, particularly Thaumiel. You then shoot straight back down the tree, ground everything, and how does it feel to very much merge the angel and the beast? Yeah. The Qliphoth leads to the Sephiroth leads to the Qliphoth. You can initiate both at the same time. You can initiate part of one, then move to the other. This is the crooked path. Okay, this is the path of death and rebirth that needs to be embraced in order for full transformation to take place. Yeah, you have to understand that you are within a light matter multiverse. You go into the Qliphoth to gain control over your own multiverse by letting go of control. Yeah, you deconstruct the illusions that are around your multiverse, and then the Sephiroth shows you how to integrate the principles into that void space so that you can then construct your own multiverse in a way that is actually helpful and conducive to the evolution of your soul. So beautiful process of initiation, but one that is extremely serious and one that you are going to need to very much approach from that non-dualistic perspective if you want to embody both. Yeah, if you want to embody both the light and the darkness. Yeah. As much as it's okay, you'll find that you'll be pulled towards one. I'm definitely more interested in the Qliphoth than the Sephiroth in nature, but the Sephiroth also provides unique initiatory value. So acknowledge that, yes, you're going to be pulled more towards one than the other by default, but often that also may mean that you need to embody some of the other one as well. Okay, so essential to understand. I think that's everything that I need to speak about in today's video. If anybody has any questions, do feel free to get in touch. Hit like and subscribe if this video was helpful to you, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.